Hello, welcome to the Craft House Magic Set of tutorials. My name's Ellie and today I'm going to show you how I knit my chevron version of the Cosy Memories blanket. So I've already published two parts of this video where I showed you how I knit one square and then how I knit additional squares onto that first square so you don't have to sew them together afterwards. So the first square you cast on 49 stitches and knitted the mitered square as per part 1 of the tutorials. So this yellow line means I've cast on stitches, and then in part 2 I showed you how to join squares onto it. So here I've picked up stitches along this side and cast on stitches along this side. So the red line means I've picked up stitches and the yellow means I've cast on, so that you can pick up stitches along this side, cast on here, or alternatively if you're adding a square to this side you'd cast on stitches here and pick up stitches there. So you tend to, if you're working on the edge, you tend to cast on 25 stitches and pick up 24, and I pick up 24 and cast on 25 here because we're working with a 49 stitch square. This last square to join on is basically where you pick up 24 stitches along this side, pick up one stitch in the square that's just opposite, and then 24 stitches along this side. And all these squares are knitted the same as this first square here. So this is a schematic diagram of how I'm going to knit my chevron version of the Cosy Memories blanket. You don't have to do exactly the same numbers of rows and columns. You can work with whatever you like. This is just an idea of what I did. So in this diagram I've got the yellow lines depicting where I've cast on stitches and the red lines where I've been picking up stitches on the previous squares. So you can see that the chevron is this direction on the first block or the first panel, this direction on the second panel, and this direction on the third panel. So I'm going to start where the blue arrow is on the first panel. So we're going to work with just panel 1, and you'd cast on stitches along both sides and knit this first square, and then you'd work all the way along the first row. See, I've labelled row 1 here. I'd work all the way across here, and then I'd go to row 2, and then I'd cast on stitches along this side, pick up stitches here and work this first square, and then pick up stitches along both sides and work all these squares along this row, and I continue all the way in as many rows as required. And here I've done 12, but it's really up to you. Then I'd work on panel number 2. Now here you start where the blue arrow is, you'd cast on 25 stitches and then pick up 24 stitches from this square to create the first square on this row, but with the chevron pointing this way. I would then suggest you worked the squares all the way up here, so that you are picking up stitches along this side and then picking up stitches along this side to complete all the squares along that row, and then I do the same for the rows next to it here, if that makes sense. So you've then completed 2 panels of the Cosy Memories blanket. I'm going to complete 3 panels. So I'm then going to go on to this part of the pattern, but you could of course do multiple repeats of these panels, or you could just have a few rows of each panel to have a shorter chevron. But this is what I've chosen to do for my blanket. So for panel 3, because you are changing direction again here, you will need to pick up 24 stitches on this side here and then cast on 25 stitches here and complete your first mitered square before working right down this row. And for all these squares here you'll be picking up 24 stitches here, 1 in the opposite square, and 24 stitches from here, and completing each of the mitered squares. You'll then repeat those rows until you've got as many rows as you like to complete your chevron section. Again, you don't have to do 7 rows. You could do additional panels if you want to. One of the most important things to remember is that when you're picking up stitches from the square before, that you need to have the front of the right side of the square facing you when you're picking up stitches. So I'm picking up stitches along here for this first square, and this square is the right side's facing me, and then I'd cast on an additional 25 to make sure that my squares were all facing the right way up and all facing this direction. So it just takes a little bit of thinking, and I'm going to attach a link to this worksheet so that you can download it yourself, so that you can work out how to do a chevron version of the Cosy Memories blanket. But if you have any questions, just pop them down below or send me a personal message on Ravelry, for instance. You can also do a sort of radiating pattern where your centre double decrease forms this sort of star shape, and I've also produced a worksheet for this pattern. What you'd need to do is follow panel 1, 2, 3 and 4, but starting on the centre squares first and then work out onto the next set of squares. So first of all I'd cast on this square by casting on 49 stitches and knitting this entire square. Then I'd go on to this one and I'd pick up 24 stitches along this side and cast on 25 stitches along that side and knit the second square. Then I'd go on to panel 3, I'd pick up 24 stitches along here and cast on 25 stitches here, knit this square, and then you're almost sort of a complete round of the blanket. You'd then be able to pick up stitches on both sides. So 24 stitches here, one in the opposite square and 24 stitches here. Then you'd have a set of 4 squares to start with. Then I would work out on to sort of second round of panel 1. I'd work this square, but then, and the important thing to remember is to not work the corner ones until you've worked sort of side panels here. So I'll just highlight that. So if you've worked these 4 centre squares, I'd first work this square, then that square, then that square, and so on all the way around, avoiding the corner squares like so. And then I'd go back and do these corner squares before going on to the next row. So you've then done a square, then I'd go on to this square and so on, avoiding the very corner squares until you've completed that round, if that makes sense. So you've completed that round apart from the corner squares, and then you go back and add those corner squares in. There we go, and you keep on doing that until you've completed the size of Cosy Memories blanket that you want to. Alternatively, you could work panel 1, then move on to panel 2, then panel 3 and panel 4, but it might be a bit more awkward to fill it in once you've got just this panel left to go. So this is why I said about doing it from the centre point, but it's completely up to you. So there we are. I've written summary points on the side of these worksheets so that you can follow them without having to listen to the video all over again, but hopefully this little video helps you. So good luck with your different versions of your Cosy Memories blanket, your chevron or your radiating pattern. So tell me about it down below in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe the video if you want to hear more. Thank you so much for watching, and happy crafting. Bye!